special, unique Pakistani tradition of kind of a wandering linguistics conference, and I very much wanted to come, but at the end I think there was some, there were some problems, internal problems in Pakistan, so it was just impossible to do it. Unfortunately, I still look forward to visiting Pakistan. I have been to 100 countries. And in the MOOC, Massive Open Online course that I conduct into language revival, I have had many Pakistani students out of 20,000 students from all over the globe, and 190 countries are represented there. But I have never been physically in Pakistan, and this is very unfortunate because one of my best friends at the United World College of the Adriatic, which is an international school in Italy, was from Karachi. So I would like to tell you that Turab asked me to talk today about revivalistics and language reclamation and well-being. But before I start, I would like to tell you, in the local Kaurna language, the local language of Adelaide, which is subject to revival. Without reclamation, I would have never been able to say what I'm telling you now. And given that I'm in Adelaide, in Australia, South Australia, Australia Australis, because as you know, Australia means in Latin south. So I'm in the south of the south, Australia Australis. I would like to tell you, so we know Kaurna people are the landowners of the plains of Adelaide, where I am currently and this is an acknowledgement of country, as we say in Australia. As you can see, Kaurna has many retroflexes, and therefore we say Kaurna with a retroflex, Kaurna, as obviously is known to you what retroflex is. And this is something that characterizes Aboriginal languages in Australia. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is that Tandanya, which is the name for Adelaide, comes from Tanda, red kangaroo, and Ganya, rock, but Tanda and Ganya together become Tandanya. This is a portmanteau blend, just as in English you have spoon and fork, spork, motor and hotel, motel, smoke and fog, smog. So this phenomenon of portmanteau blending exists even in Kaurna, which is a Turayura Pamanyungan Aboriginal language. Needless to say, it had nothing to do with English, which is full of portmanteau blends, although, as you know, we are all from Africa originally. This is, I call it Revivalistics, and this is Revivalistics, my book from the genesis of Israeli to language reclamation in Australia and beyond. And the lecture today is based on this book. Of course, it does not cover the entire book. The entire book is very thorough, very comprehensive, and you can have a look. If you go to Oxford University Press Shop or Amazon, you can even get a digital copy of this book. Language revival has to do with resources, even though most languages that are being revived do not have script traditionally. As you know, most languages in the world do not have a script traditionally. So Urdu and English, Hebrew are unique in the sense that they have script, they have literature. However, when you revive a language, even though you revive languages with no script, you do need to use script and resources. Language revival has to do with resilience. This is your humble servant, meaning myself, with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, the boxing hero that was in Detroit. There were no iPhones, but I managed to take a photo with my Konica Pop. And if you know anything about Muhammad Ali, he was there for the long run. He was a great athlete, and he was not like Rambo that just kind of gives you one knockout and you're dead. He was there as a long, resilient, committed sportsman. And this is exactly what you need in language revival, especially in the case of language reclamation, which is the revival of a no longer spoken language, also known by me as sleeping beauty or a dreaming beauty in the case of Australia, where we have Jukurpa or dream time. Language revival has to do with well-being, and this is the main point of my lecture today. This is Lisa Taylor's son, Liam, a Barngarla child. Language revival has to do with missionaries sometimes, in this case, Clamor Wilhelm Schumann, a German Lutheran Christian missionary who came to Australia in 1838 from Dresden, originally from Bissendorf-Osnabrück in Germany. And he wrote down the dictionary of Barngarla in order to Christianize the Barngarla people. I, a secular, non-religious, non-Christian Jewish person, use this dictionary for the opposite purpose, not in order to Christianize or to show the Aboriginal people the Western light, rather in order to help the Aboriginal people, namely the Barngarla tribe, reconnect with their own spirituality, which in my view was obliterated by missionary activities and by colonization. And therefore, there is a very beautiful righting the wrong of the past here. The other beautiful symmetric righting the wrong of the past is that I use an app. I can show you the app if you look at the camera. And this app I designed with the Barngarla people, and it has many, many, many words. You can choose a word, and then you can listen to how to say.
A kind of fungus. Idnidly.
Again.
Idnidly. A kind of fungus. Idnidly.
So you can learn the word idnidly, and which is a kind of mushroom. But the point of the symmetric righting the wrong of the past is that technology is used for language reclamation, whilst technology is one of the reasons for linguicide or language killing. Don't forget that the colonizers, the Anglo-Celtic colonizers, arrived in Australia because of technology, because of ships, because of weapons, and of course because of black cars that stole people like my friend Howard Richards from his mother. This is called the Stolen Generations phenomenon. This is the app that I mentioned. This is Barngarla Elder Harry Dare in Port Augusta, featuring in the Barngarla app, in this case, Mustache, Buldi Nuldini, Mustache, or Mustache if you want. And Howard Richards is this guy with the blue shirt. Unfortunately, he died 2 years ago. He was my best friend, my best Barngarla friend. This is the first Barngarla Aboriginal reclamation workshop that I conducted in Gallinyala, Port Lincoln. I'm showing you these photos even before I start because this is my life. I decided to dedicate my life to the reclamation of languages that were subject to linguicide, language killing. It's a very tough job. You need 4 characteristics. You need to have a heart of gold, balls of steel. Forgive my politically incorrect metaphor. Of course, women are invited too, but you need to have very tough resilience personality. So again, heart of gold, balls of steel, patience of a saint or of a crocodile, and the willingness to be a punch bag. Because when you work with minority people, with Aboriginal people, often if you're not part of the tribe itself, you would end up being a punch bag. I am very good in 2 characteristics out of the 4. I have a heart of gold and I have balls of steel. If there is something I need to improve, and I think that it's very important that every revivalist is aware of his limits, I need to improve my patience. It needs to be the patience of a saint. I don't think I have arrived at that level. And I also need to improve my willingness to be a punch bag. So I have not arrived at the high level of willingness to be a punch bag. Without these 4 characteristics, you cannot be a successful revivalist. The main question of today's lecture is, why on earth should we invest time and money in reviving dead languages? This is a very important question because it deals with the layman's tax money too, because I believe that governments should fund the revival of linguicided languages, the reclamation of languages that were subject to language killing, linguicide. Just like genocide, there is linguicide. I would like to give you today 3 main reasons for why I believe that we ought to invest time and money in reviving dead languages. The first reason or type of reason is ethical, moral, deontological, and this is what is the right thing to do. The second reason is aesthetic. It has to do with this being the beautiful thing to do. And we are human beings, we are not animals. Even animals care about beauty. A fortiori, Homo sapiens sapiens Israelicus vulgaris. And the third main reason is utilitarian. That is, what is the useful, the beneficial, the economically viable thing to do. For example, health and well-being, which is at the heart of the specific lecture today. Whilst I use ethical reasons for myself, I do everything I do simply only out of ethical reasons. I would use the third reason when I talk to public servants, because when you talk to politicians, actually you can use ethical reasons. But when you talk to public servants, you need to have utilitarian reasons. You need to tell the public servant, you give me $1 million, I'm saving you $5 million. And you need to explain exactly how. And I'm going to give you some ideas about it today. But there are many related questions to these main questions. For example, should we financially compensate indigenous people for the loss of their native tongues? Why is it that we compensate people for the loss of land, but we do not compensate people for the loss of language? I strongly believe that language is much more important than the specific land to which you are born. And therefore, I disagree with the Western idea that we should give money for land loss, but we should not give money for language loss. I know why we give money for land loss, because land you can touch, it's tangible. And I know why we do not compensate for language loss, because language you cannot touch, it's intangible. But who said that the tangible is more important than the intangible? In fact, personally, I believe that language for me is much more important than the specific land where I was born, etc. Of course, we need land to live on. I'm not saying that we can live in the air. We need food, etc. But I'm saying that there is, unfortunately, hyper attention given to land and no attention given to lang, or to language. The other question, which is related to the main question today, is should indigenous languages be defined as official languages, for example, of Australia? As you know, in Australia, there are no official languages. English is de facto, but not de jure. Australia, in my view, has to learn from New Zealand, Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, also known by some Maori friend of mine as the land of the wrong white crowd. Long white cloud, wrong white crowd. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, there are two official languages. One of them is Te Reo Māori, the language Maori, and the other one, no, it's not English, even though English is de facto, it's the sign language, the New Zealand sign language of the deaf people. This is beautiful, and I believe that Australia should have 401 official languages, 400 Aboriginal Australian languages, and 1 Australian Sign Language. English should not be official language de jure because it is a de facto official language. Another question, should we erect bilingual signs? And of course, the answer is absolutely yes. Everything in Adelaide should be both in English and in Kaurna, the Aboriginal language of Adelaide. Everything in Port Lincoln or in Whyalla or in Port Augusta should be in English and in Barngarla. Barngarla is a language that I have been reviving. This is the book that Turab very generously mentioned earlier. It's a second edition from just this week. I've just printed it out. Another question is, does language dictate the way we think? Well, this is a big question which has to do with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I will answer it very quickly by saying that I believe that whilst language does not dictate the way we think, it definitely influences the way we think. And I can talk about it at length if you have questions later. And finally, is it possible at all to reclaim a sleeping, dreaming beauty, also known as dead language? The answer to this is yes, but there is a necessary condition: cross-fertilization with the revivalists' mother tongues. So in the case of Israeli, which is my mother tongue, Israeli is a mishmash, it's a hybrid of Hebrew, the ancient language of Isaiah from the Old Testament, and of Yiddish, the language of the revivalists who came to Israel from, say, Poland, Lithuania, etc. For example, Eliezer ben Yehuda. Israeli is on the one hand a phoenix rising from the ashes, this is Hebrew, but Israeli is on the other hand a cuckoo laying its eggs in the nest of another bird, tricking it to believe that it is its own eggs. This is Yiddish. And of course, Israeli is a magpie, gadzaladra, stealing from Arabic, from American, from Russian, from Polish, etc. It's a rara avis. It's a rare bird. Any revival language must include cross-fertilization with the revivalists' mother tongues that are obviously different from the language that you're reclaiming. I'm talking about the case in which the language is a sleeping beauty. In other words, there are no native speakers. Language revivalists all over the world. I work in South Africa, in Namibia, in Thailand, and of course in Australia, all over the world. It's a beautiful enterprise. I must study politics and war, that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. my sons, ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture again, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. These beautiful, beautiful words were uttered by John Adams, the second president of the United States of America. I would have added to the last sentence, to the last point, porcelain and revivalistics, heritage languages, endangered languages of Pakistan, etc., etc. I think that we should always remember this sentence, especially in these dire times of budget cuts in the West, in these dire times of closures of linguistics departments, of humanities subjects, due to the universities becoming factories and becoming kind of corporate mindset KPI institutions, just like companies. Let us remember this beautiful sentence. Now, I'm not as pessimistic as you might have thought from the tone of what I've just said about the demise of Western universities. In fact, I believe that we will go up Maslow's hierarchy of needs in due course after COVID and all this palpable poppycock. As you know, the Jewish American Abraham Maslow devised this beautiful hierarchy. And if you, of course, he didn't have battery and Wi-Fi at the time, we need to add it these days, but probably you would argue that most people, let's forget about COVID, most people in the world are in belonging love, like most Chinese people. They have friends, family, spouse, lover, etc. How many of them, I'm talking about the normies, the hoi polloi, the masses, I'm not talking about the elite. How many of them achieve self-esteem? How many of them achieve self-actualization? Extremely few. Extremely few. How many of you have reached your ikigai? Ikigai. I-K-I-G-A-I. Ikigai. I'll come back to ikigai during my talk. Just remember this term, ikigai. Now, I'm saying that people will go up this ladder or this hierarchy because of the technological revolution that allows me, your humble servant, to give you a lecture, a talk, and then Q&A, questions and answers, from Adelaide, Australia, to Pakistan and all over the world. I mean, this is kind of impossible several dozens of years ago. I remember, and I'm not that old, well, I'm old, but not that old. My hair is not white yet. I remember when my friend told me about email and said, what? I mean, I don't understand. What do you mean you write it in the computer in Israel and your friend sees it at the same time in Canada? I couldn't believe it. I remember it in my lifetime. This is a revolution, and the technological revolution will turn people from seeking things to seeking ideas, just as the Industrial Revolution of 1760, 1840, turned people from seeking food to seeking things. This is when the technological revolution this is when we will go up the hierarchy, because we'll look for ideas. Now, I mentioned the technological revolution. I must mention the four linguistic revolutions as I see them. Speaking more than 70,000 years ago, this is a revolution that allowed us, Homo sapiens sapiens, to lie about the future, the past, because animals, they can lie. I mean, they can pretend to be dangerous, although they're not dangerous. This is like camouflage, but they cannot lie about, say, 10 years ago, I killed 1,000 animals. Impossible. They cannot lie about the past. They cannot lie about the future. They cannot say, in 100 days, I'm going to have 1,000 wives or something like that. They cannot lie about the future, right? This is why we ended up with language, which is human. Yeah, I mean, another thing, we can swear. I mean, we can say the F word without punching the person. I mean, of course, animals can do, you know, like, but it's not the same as swear word. I mean, sometimes you want the other person just to feel bad, and you use swear words. And this is something that, I mean, I've never heard of a cow that swears another cow or something like that, you know, you F off. Writing is the second linguistic revolution. It is approximately 5,200 years ago. This was because of thieves. Thieves are the ones who stole wheat, for example, that was sent from Iraq to Israel, and when the Israelis sent back to to Baghdad or whatever they wanted to send back, like salt, I mean, they realized in Iraq, in Mesopotamia, that there was not enough produce, and they asked why, and they said, oh no, there was a thief on the way. So they said, what do you mean a thief? So next time they wrote 4 units of wheat. This is the beginning of writing, an economic reason. So I attack economics when it comes to universities, but actually economics is what is making these revolutions. Type printing, 1450 AD, Johannes Gutenberg develops the first European movable type printing press, enabling mass production of books. That eventually results in the importance of spelling bees. As you know, Shakespeare spelled his surname in 5 different ways, none of which was Shakespeare. He was not dyslexic, he just could not care less about spelling. I mean, spelling really became important after the 1450 revolution and after Shakespeare, when you suddenly had many, many books being printed and you wanted to have standardization. And now the fourth and the current linguistic revolution, which is the technological revolution, talk and technology, the 20th century to present, digital mass media, CNN, Facebook, Twitter, Google, big data. I should mention that the universe is approximately 13.82 billion years old. DNA is approximately 3.5 billion years old. Homo sapiens has existed in Africa for at least 300,000 years, and we are all Aboriginal people, Pakistani people, Jewish people, we are all from Africa, as you know. Okay. So why should we invest time and money in reclaiming languages? Firstly, the ethical reason, historical, humanistic, and social justice. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. You remember heart of gold. I believe in native tongue title. The loss of language, as I told you, is more severe than the loss of land. Well, I didn't say that exactly. Language death is the loss of cultural autonomy. Language death is the loss of spiritual and intellectual sovereignty. Language death is loss of soul. Language is an archaeological vehicle full of the remnants of dead and living pasts, lost and buried civilizations and technologies. The language we speak is a whole palimpsest of human effort and history. Palimpsest is when you write on top of another written text. And of course, as historians, we are interested in what is written behind, not in what is written on top. This is Anthony Forster, a colonist, financier, and politician. And he said in 1843, the native would be sooner civilized if their language was extinct. This is an ideology of linguicide, language killing. You kill the Aboriginal languages in Australia in order to Europeanize the heathens, in quotation marks. This is an unfortunate reality that we see here in Australia, but not only in Australia. This is South Australian Governor George Grey. The ruder languages disappear successively, and the tongue of England alone is heard around. Why does he call the Aboriginal languages the ruder languages? They're not ruder. They're very complex. This is
Professor Zuckerman, sorry for interruption. Slides are not shown to the participants.
You mean not even one slide?
Yeah, it's still your screen is stuck on the first slide. Yes, it's okay now.
It's okay now?
Yeah, it's okay now.
So can you see now the slides?
Yeah, it's the, yes, it's, I think it's slide that's written the Australian Aboriginal flag designed by Harold Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you see these slides here when I'm changing the slides? Do you see them?
Yes, it's visible. Your slide is visible. I think it is slide number 49.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello. If you put your slides on the reading mode, they would be visible to us as you go about.
Yeah, if you just press F5, I think it will be
to the reading view. To the reading view, right next to the slide, there would be a reading view.
So you cannot see the slide now.
We have you are on slide 49 now, perhaps, but when you will start again, we won't be able to see them.
But are you able to see my slides right now?
Right now, yes.
We are able
but
to
all
see.
but the side bar as well. We are able to see the sidebar as well. If you put it into the reading mode, it would be visible for us, the slides only. The main slide you are talking about.
Oh, I see. Okay. So let me just check this. So you're saying that stop sharing. Let me just share again. Let me just try to share again. Oh, I can see that there are more people now. That's beautiful. Excellent. That's nice. So, but have you seen the slide so far or not?
No. No, we couldn't see. We had been requesting, but we couldn't see.
You mean I gave the lecture and you didn't have any access to the slides?
Yes.
Oh, that's terrible.
We see only the first slide we see.
Wow, another reason to do Zoom instead of this funny thing. Okay, so can you let me know? I go to a window or a tab when I do present?
First, you say share the slides, and then you turn on the reading mode.
When I do present, do I need your entire screen, a window, or a tab?
No, just share it, and the only your.
We are not in Zoom.
Yes, the tab.
Yes, a window will work.
Window or a tab? I'm asking. You're very confused.
A window would work.
A window, okay. And now, when I go there, I select this, share. Now, what do you want me to do?
Once it's shared, then go into the reading mode.
What is reading mode?
Right next to the presentation icon, there is a reading view.
Professor, please press F5.
Press F5. Press F5.
Yeah, this is what I always do. So, can you see the slides now?
Yes, we see the slides now, but
I think it's fine. It's fine this way.
So, what is exactly the problem? I don't understand.
The
problem is that we have lost 48 slides of yours, and I think to me it's like losing the indigenous language. 48 slides. So kindly revive them.
So, can you see the slide now of the flag? Yes or no?
Yes, no. Yes, we can see the slide.
Yes.
Excuse me.
The slides are visible. So the slides
are not in a reading mode, sir.
The problem is the slides are not playing by themselves. If you're physically changing, the slides will change, but if you're not, it's getting frozen at one particular slide. Like when you started, it was your cover slide, and for 48 slides, we just saw your cover slide. And then when you changed it, we saw slide number 49. So there is a slideshow option at the top. You can use that.
I'm using that all the time. This is a slideshow.
But it's not working. So if you would be kind enough, right in the lower corner, right next to the slideshow, reading view is given. If you press the reading view, right next to the slideshow,
I cannot see reading view. I can see file. I can see file, home, insert, design, transition, animations. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
It's the right
Sir,
lower
you just press
corner.
F5. F5.
Right lower corner.
Within the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes. You just press F5.
I always press F5. What do you mean? Control F5. But she says something else. Where is the reading view?
Right next to the slideshow icon in the right lower corner. Yes.
On your PowerPoint.
Yeah, reading view.
On your PowerPoint.
Now this is it. This is right. This is right.
Now it is okay. Now it is okay. You can carry.
Yes.
Okay.
So will we be able to get the recording, or will we be able to get the
That's
slide?
amazing. And can you explain to me why it doesn't work if I do not press the reading view? I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, but I have been doing this with my students for now 6 months or so I know this. That's why I requested you this.
No, but I'm asking because I have given lectures maybe all over the world and I have never had this problem. Is it something that has to do with Google as opposed to Zoom?
No. It is.
Yes.
Or no?
In Google Meet it is a thing. On Microsoft Team, on Zoom, you don't face this problem.
Okay, can I recommend to Rob not to use this this one because obviously many people never use it and they do not know this about the reading view.
Yes, Professor, you're right.
Why do we not do Zoom?
On Zoom, there's a problem. We have a 40-minute sessions, and like I haven't a paid version of Zoom, so this is a problem.
In Zoom, you can do like, oh, is it only 1 hour? There is an hour limit. Are you saying?
Yeah, 45 minutes only. 45 minutes there. Yeah.
I understand. Thank you for letting me know. Next time you ask me, I will give you as many hours as you want on Zoom.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, will we be able to get the slide?
So we
Yes,
will need
slides
your
will-
slides
By the
as
way,
well.
it shows you.
Slides will be shared. Yes, slides will
Sir,
be
please
shared.
continue your lecture, sir.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
I'm very disappointed by what happened here because I showed you many slides and you should have stopped me at the very beginning for
Yeah, we
not
have
seeing
been
the slides.
requesting. Sorry, but we have been
Yes, sir.
requesting.
You should have stopped me.
That's
You
why
should have-
we are
you should have
requesting you
talked.
for the slides, sir.
You should have
No,
talked.
we have people are messaging you.
Yes, we have been highlighting this problem since beginning, I think.
Oh, I see. But I'm not looking at the messages. That's funny. Okay, no worries. No problem whatsoever. Maybe, Turab, next time when somebody messages, you need to act accordingly. Are you with me,
Okay.
Turab?
Thank you. Yeah.
Because when I give a lecture, I look at the camera. I don't look at any chats.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Okay. I'm sorry for
I'm
that.
just trying to improve for the future because this is unacceptable. For the future, not to me.
Okay.
Okay, I'm coming back to the lecture. Is it the case that everybody can see the slide now?
Yes.
Yes, it's visible now.
Excellent. That's wonderful.
But can you believe, sir, your 48 slides are just like indigenous languages being died, and we want to revive them, but I hope that you will share the slides as well.
Yeah. This is the Australian Aboriginal flag designed by Harold Thomas. It was first flown on the 12th of July, 1971 at Victoria Square. And you can see that there is the black color, which represents the people because the skin is black. You have the red color, which represents the soil, because in Australia, the soil is red and as opposed to brown. And then you have the yellow, which represents the sun or the life. And this is my own proposal for the Aboriginal flag. You have the black, which represents the people. you have the red, which represents the land, and then in the middle you have the pink, which represents the tongue, the language. And the reason is that in Aboriginal spirituality, the land, the people, and the language are a part of a trinity. So the language is in fact the land and the people, and the language belongs to the land. It's the mouth of the land, not only of the people. This is Aboriginal spirituality, which causes Aboriginal people, for example, who go to Galinyala, Port Lincoln, and they see a kangaroo, they would only speak to the kangaroo in the Barngarla language, because if you speak to the kangaroo in another Aboriginal language, the kangaroo will not understand you, so to speak. So this is the spirituality. And the reason is that language is as important as land. This is my flag for Australia. You can see that you have the Australian continent. On the right, there is Tasmania. It's a small island. Adelaide is somewhere here. I hope you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, yes.
Oh, you can see it. That's one. That's excellent. Thank you. And this is the people, the land, and the lang, or the language. Now, I would like to move on to aesthetic motivation. So I've talked about ethical reasons. Why should we invest time and money in reclaiming, revitalizing, or reinvigorating languages? And in the ethical reasons, I told you we should do it because these languages were subject to linguicide. They were killed, and therefore they deserve to be revived. I would like to move on to aesthetic motivations, and this is echoing Ken Hale, who was an MIT linguist. When you lose a language, you lose a culture, intellectual wealth, a work of art. It's like dropping a bomb on a museum, the Louvre. This has to do with taste. I love cheeses. I believe in cheeses. I go to the Adelaide market and ask for cheeses. But maybe tomorrow they might tell me, sorry, sir, we only serve cheddar cheese. I would be extremely disappointed. But you might be lactose intolerant or lactose malabsorbent, and therefore you don't care about cheeses. So it's a matter of taste. Look how beautiful Australia used to be. 400 shadows of color, beautiful and different cultures. Look how beautiful Australia used to be. Look how ugly Australia is today. There are two reasons for the ugliness in my aesthetic view. Firstly, it is monochrome. Everybody speaks one language called English. The other thing is the borders are very straight and arbitrary. Compare it to the original borders of, well, the Western ideas of the original Aboriginal borders, because of course Aboriginal borders were not that clear. They were much more fluid, as you know. But look how beautiful it is. Maybe there is a river, maybe there are trees in between. Look how ugly. In fact, South Australia, where I am now, is closed today to Queensland, Northern Territory, and Western Australia, and also New South Wales because of COVID, unfortunately. So I'm supposed to fly to Darwin in a few days, but I might not be able to do it because of this COVID. And all the borders that we use are very straight borders. This border that you see here between Western Australia and Northern Territory and South Australia, this border is actually the continuation of the border between Argentina and Brazil in Latin America. There was a treaty between Spain and Portugal that divided Latin America into two parts, and this border between Western Australia and the rest continues that treaty, which is ironic because the treaty had nothing to do with Australia, had nothing to do with the Aboriginal people of Australia. So this shows you the aesthetics. Let me give you some more slides here. This is what we want. The most complex Chinese character I have ever encountered in Xi'an, the terracotta, near the terracotta warriors. It's also endangered, aesthetically beautiful. It's 57 strokes, one character, 57 strokes, you know, 57. So you might get a stroke when you try to stroke it. This is in Adelaide. I found a restaurant with that. I'm going a little bit quick because we don't have time. These are animals. The survival of the Tasmanian devil is important. What about the survival of the Palawa languages of Tasmania? Why is it that people care more about animals than about languages? Of course, it has to do with what I mentioned earlier, and this is the tangibility or intangibility. Animals you can touch. Even an ugly animal like the Tasmanian devil receives money from people. I'm not against animals. I pay my dues to the Adelaide Zoo, and I have a friend with orphan joeys, kangaroos. She actually has these kangaroos as babies at her home, and I take my friends there. Language is aesthetically pleasing. Consider Yagan in Tierra del Fuego, Chile, Argentina. This word, Mamihlapinatapai, refers to a look shared by two people, each wishing that the other will offer something that they both desire, but have been unwilling to suggest or offer themselves. This is beautiful. This is aesthetically pleasing. And this is an endangered grammatical way to express a familiar concept. I can analyze it morphemically if I have time. And this is beautiful. It's aesthetically pleasing. This is the ikigai that I mentioned to you earlier. It's the Japanese concept of raison d'être. And in fact, it is the intersection of what the world needs, what you're paid for, what you're good at, and what you love. Look how beautiful this concept is. It's an endangered grammatical way to express familiar concept, because I'm sure you all want to reach your ikigai, but some of you end up with an ikigai. This is an endangered concept altogether. Nahur in ancient Persian means a camel that will not give milk until her nostrils have been tickled. You can see that this is a concept that I personally would have never thought about. Why should I think about such a camel? I know nothing about milking. And of course, you know that the imagination of human beings is extremely limited. For example, in most Hollywood films, aliens look like ugly human beings. Given the 3.5 billion years of DNA evolution, and given that the world is not infinite, the chances that an alien would look like us are extremely slim. And if we design movies or films in Hollywood with aliens looking like ugly human beings, it just shows you how stupid and how imagination limited Homo sapiens sapiens are. Tingo, to take all the objects one desires from the house of a friend one at a time, by asking to borrow them until there is nothing left. This is a concept that I would have never thought about on my own. This is beautiful, and this is why we should revive these endangered concepts. I would like now to end with utilitarian benefits, and this is the most important part of my lecture, or the crux of the lecture today. This has to do with health. Yeah.
As it is the most important part, so please don't bother about time and take your time. I think participants will bear with us.
No worries, no worries. So it will take me 10 more minutes, and then we can open the floor for questions. So look, personal, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, sense of pride and self-esteem, antidote for self-loathing. As you may have already seen it all over the world, as a generalization, and of course, as a linguist, I must generalize. A linguist who does not generalize is a spy, because language ipso facto is a generalization. A language is a collection of lects. It's a collection, an abstract ensemble of idiolects, sociolects, dialects, and other lects. So of course, I'm generalizing because I'm a linguist. You know, once a student told me, why are you generalizing? I said, because I'm a linguist. What do you mean? I mean, but it's politically incorrect to generalize. Well, so you cannot be a linguist if you want to be politically correct. Impossible, because you must generalize. I hope you understand this point. As a generalization, colonized people hate two types of people. They hate the colonizers, and I think that it is obvious why they hate the colonizers. But this is not the tragedy. The tragedy is the second hatred by colonized people. Colonized people, as a generalization, do not only hate the colonizers, but they also hate themselves. Why do the colonized people hate themselves? Well, it's a little bit like the Stockholm syndrome, in which somebody kidnaps you and then you fall in love with him, or you believe the stupid kidnappers. It's a little bit like that. It's also a little bit like the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect in education. If you tell a child you are a fuckwit, you're an idiot, the child has more chances to be stupid. If you tell a child you're a genius, you're the cleverest person on earth, the child has more chances to be brilliant. This is the Pygmalion effect. When the colonizers tell the colonized, you are worthless, you're part of our fauna, of the animal kingdom, you are nothing, it trickles down. And this is the tragedy, in my view, of colonization. Again, I'm generalizing. Again, I'm politically incorrect. So please forgive me. I believe that language reclamation can act as an antidote for that self-loathing that I have just mentioned. And therefore, it is utilitarianistically of great importance to society, because societies should not want everybody to speak the same language. It's palpable poppycock that if you speak the same language, you will not kill each other. It's enough to look, to Google Rwanda 1994, where Tutsis and Hutus killed each other like animals, speaking the very same dialect. Or Google Syria 2020, and you will see the civil war in Syria, in which Arabs speaking Arabic, the same Arabic, kill each other, other Arabs speaking the same Arabic. So this idea that you speak the same language or there will be no wars is palpable poppycock. So by, in fact, allowing people to reconnect with their heritage, you make them happier people, which is better for society. What does the government, what should the government want? The government should want all tribes, all people to be happy, to be harmonious. This is when there will be harmonious with the others, because if you're not harmonious within your own tribe, or if you're not happy within yourself, then how can you be happy with other people? I mean, it's as simple as that. This is an email from Jenna. Personally, I found the experience of learning our language liberating and went home feeling very overwhelmed because we were finally going to learn our own language. It gave me a sense of identity. And I think if the whole family learned a language, then we would all feel totally different about ourselves and each other, because it's almost like it gives you a purpose in life. This is an unsolicited Facebook comment from Evelyn. A big thank you on behalf of our family here in Port Lincoln. Our ancestors are happy. When an Aboriginal person tells you our ancestors are happy, it means that they are happy. Darcy Hallett, Michael Chandler, and Christopher Lalonde in 2007 wrote an article called Aboriginal Language Knowledge and Youth Suicide. They discovered that in British Columbia, Canada, there is a clear correlation between youth suicide and lack of conversational knowledge in the native language. I would like to argue that just as there is a correlation between language loss and youth suicide, there is also a correlation between language reclamation and diminishing of youth suicide. In other words, I would like to argue, and this is a hypothesis within our NHMRC project, National Health and Medical Research Council, I would like to argue that just as language loss causes bad well-being, language revival causes good well-being. Language revival results in improved mental health, in personal empowerment. And this is when you will be able to tell the civil servants in your own government, look, you give me $1 million, but because all the people who participate in the language reclamation will feel better about ourselves, then you will have 10 fewer people going to jail, and every person in jail, at least in Australia, is $150,000 for the taxpayer without the opportunity loss. Of course, this person could have contributed to society by working somewhere, etc. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about how much money it costs to feed them in a parasitic way. You're in the prison. What do? You do nothing. To have all the guards, etc., etc. $150,000. In the case of adolescent, of mental health adolescent, every day is like almost $1,500 every night of hospitalization. So you see what I'm doing. I'm number crunching or bean counting, which is something I hate doing, but it is very important to do it when you talk to the civil servants who might give you a grant, for example. I hope that our NHMRC project will be a game changer all over the world, in the sense that it will show governments that language revival should not be categorized under humanities or under arts. As you know, there is not much money in humanities and in arts, but rather language revival should be categorized under health. And as you know, there are billions of dollars being spent on health. I mean, every day we have billions of dollars, even in Australia, spent on tests, etc., etc. Okay, I would like to conclude by telling you that this is a language revival diamond. You must have the 4 components. You need the public sphere, you need the language owners, you need the education, and you need linguistics. Revivalistics is not linguistics. It includes linguistics, but it is far larger than linguistics. Or if you want, it's a Venn diagram, there is an intersection. Immersion. This is the MOOC that I mentioned. I went to Burma when it was allowed to travel, and I bumped into this American student of mine on MOOC. It was very funny. I will share with Turab my PowerPoint, given that you, unfortunately, due to the technical problem of this horrible program, you could not see. So I will share my PowerPoint, and then you'll be able to read this. And let me just tell you, finally, Australian signs. And look, this is in Sydney. You have the signs here. you do not, you need to tell me whether the ticket that I received on the left was justified. This is a typical Australian sign, just to give you an understanding of how bureaucratic Australia is. Australia is neither a democracy, I'm talking about modern Australia. Modern Australia, I'm not talking about Aboriginal Australia. Modern Australia is neither a bureaucracy nor a democracy. It is actually a bureaucracy. Bureaucracy. Everything is bureaucratic. This is another sign. Don't drive like a knob. Knob, don't drive like a knob. My Chinese student asked me whether it's don't drive like a chicken, but of course, this is not what it is. It's don't drive like a cock, which means like idiot. And when I saw this sign, this is in South Australia, I was so impressed that I, as a linguist, wanted to take a photo. So I made a very dangerous U-turn, of course, seeing this sign. And somebody shouted, "Don't drive like a wanker." So I understood that this is W anchor. So don't drive like a wanker. But the best sign of all Australian signs is the sign that I'm going to finish my lecture with, and this is this sign. And I reanalyze it as following. If your language is endangered, do not allow it to fall asleep. If your language falls asleep, stop, revive, survive. If you revive a language, embrace the hybridity, the cross-fertilization, as I mentioned at the very beginning of my talk today, in the children's emerging tongue. Because the revival language will not belong to the Semitic languages or Tura-Yura languages. It will belong to the family of revival languages. This is a very unique linguistic family where all the revival languages belong to, because there are some aspects of language that are revivable, and there are some aspects of language that are unrevivable. And I can predict, without knowing anything about the language being reclaimed, which parts will be around in the revival language from the original language, and which parts will be much more from the revivalists' mother tongues. So these are international, global constraints. This is where revivalistics is a revolutionary, new transdisciplinary field of inquiry. And if your language is healthy, say you speak Urdu, say you speak American, say you speak Spanish, say you speak Egyptian Arabic, say you speak Mandarin. If your language is healthy, not too many languages are healthy, but if your language is healthy, consider helping others in linguistic need. There are thousands of groups of people in the world who would like you to help them. They are not linguists. They never studied linguistics. They need a revivalist, and a revivalist ought to have linguistics background. Of course, it's not enough, but you need linguistics too. Thank you so much, and I'm opening the floor for any question.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Alamgir Mirza, a PhD scholar from Namal University and my senior. How's the method adopted by Ben Yehuda in reviving Yiddish can be critically analyzed with that of modern ways of reviving a language?
Yeah.
Ben Yehuda had a success story with Yiddish. What's the modern success story of modern times in your views? If yes, why so?
So firstly, thank you for this beautiful question. Eliezer Ben Yehuda was a Yiddish speaker. He spoke Yiddish. Yiddish is a Germanic language which was influenced by Aramaic and by Hebrew, but then it underwent Slavonization when Jews moved from Poland to, from Germany to Poland following the pandemic called bubonic plague. It was a little bit like COVID. But at the time, there were many blood libels, and some Germans claimed that the Jews were the ones who spread the diseases. So, as you know, half of Western Europe was killed by the bubonic plague, the Black Death. Yeah, this is 1349. So Jews had to escape to Poland, and this is when Yiddish underwent Slavonization. So Yiddish is a mishmash, a fascinating language. And Ben Yehuda hated Yiddish. He didn't want to speak Yiddish. He wanted to speak Hebrew, like the ancient Isaiah. He wanted to be like an Arab, to speak a Semitic language, to ride a biblical camel, and to enter the biblical Jerusalem. So he wanted actually Jews to go back to 2,500 years. But as the first part of this book shows, he failed. He failed to deny Yiddish, because Israeli is Yiddish beneath it. So in other words, this is a pun, a wordplay. In revived Hebrew, Retzach Yiddish means the murder of Yiddish. And Yiddish Retzach in Yiddish means Yiddish speaks itself. So I say that Israeli is not Retzach Yiddish. It's not the murder of Yiddish. It's Yiddish Retzach. Yiddish speaks itself beneath Israeli. So it's not Retzach Yiddish. It's Yiddish Retzach. It's kind of a play of words. So it's a little bit like, they asked me, what do you do here? It's a workshop. What do you and your wife, what are you doing here? So I say, it's a workshop. So what kind of workshop? So I work, she shops. You know, I'm working, she's shopping. You know, it's a little bit like that. Now, what you can hear, what you can learn from Eliezer Ben Yehuda's attempt to revive Hebrew are two main things. Three. Firstly, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it is the only type of group that has ever changed the world. It's always a small group of people. Eliezer Ben Yehuda was considered a monomaniac, a crazy person. People looked at him and said, "Are you crazy? We will never be able to speak the language of Isaiah. This is ridiculous. Either we speak German or English or Yiddish or whatever." Yiddish they hated, because Zionism, if you want, is the negation of the diasporic Jew. Zionists hated the Jews of the diaspora. They wanted to be new. They wanted to be without religion. They wanted to be not persecuted. Don't forget, Jews all over the world, as you know, were persecuted. I mean, the Holocaust, of course, is the worst persecution, but Jews have always been persecuted. Well, not everywhere. I mean, in fact, in the Arab world, there were outstanding periods, but as a generalization, they were persecuted. So, coming back to Ben Yehuda, firstly, a small group of people can change the world. He changed the world, at least for the Jewish people. Secondly, you cannot fight cross-fertilization with your mother tongue. If you want to revive Barngarla and you speak English, Neo-Barngarla will be a conglomeration, a hybrid of Barngarla and English. Impossible to deny, impossible to do anything. And third, we can learn from Ben Yehuda that there are some parts of language that are easily revivable and some parts of language that are impossibly revivable. For example, it is easy to revive words. It is impossible to revive phonology. Yeah, I'm kind of generalizing. It is easy to revive morphemes. It is impossible to revive semantics. It is impossible to revive, for example, syntax, intonation. You end up speaking very similarly to your mother tongue. And what is interesting here is that, of course, the children or the grandchildren, they learn from this imperfect language, imperfect in quotation marks. With this regard, it might remind you of what happens with pigeons becoming creoles, etc., etc. So there is a lot one can learn from Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and this book is dedicated in its first half to this question.
Thank you so much, sir, for valuable reply to my question, and all praise for you.
Thank you, Alamgir, and thank you, Professor. One of my class fellows, Hamid, he has internet issue, but he texted me the question. He's asking that how you define an indigenous language.
How do you define an indigenous language? It's a wonderful question, because indigenous language is obviously a relative term. I mean, every language was indigenous. I mean, we are all, as I said, from Africa. So obviously, you know, I mean, English is indigenous for England, right? I mean, but then of course, when it comes to Australia, it's not indigenous because it's a foreign language. So indigenous for me is a relative language. It's a relative term. It's a relative to the place we are talking about. You know, it's a little bit like in Australia, they ask, are you Aboriginal? Well, if I am from Pakistan and I'm Aboriginal, or if I'm from India and I'm Aboriginal, indigenous, I cannot say I'm Aboriginal, but of course I'm Aboriginal. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's all relative. You know that there were 7 Jews who changed the world. This is a joke, yeah? Moses said everything is in the head. Jesus said everything is in the heart. You know, Marx, you know, Karl Marx, he was Jewish. He said everything is in the stomach. Freud, Sigmund Freud said everything is in the loins. Zuckerberg said everything is in the finger. Zuckerman, it's me. There is Zuckerberg, there is Zuckerman. So everything is in the tongue. But the cleverest of all, Einstein, said everything is relative. And the success of language revival is relative. It's never fully successful. And also the definition of an indigenous language is relative. It's not absolute. It's not global. We are all indigenous after all. However, when I'm in Australia, I have no right to say I'm indigenous because I'm not indigenous to Australia. I have no DNA with Aboriginal culture. Nothing, zero. There are many Australians who argue that they're Aboriginal, although they have zero DNA with Aboriginal. This is a fraud. There are some people like that. But I can tell you, I have no Aboriginal DNA. So therefore, I'm not Aboriginal. I'm not indigenous, and I don't speak, sorry, I speak indigenous languages, but I am not a custodian. I'm not an owner of any indigenous language in Australia. And importantly, there is a distinction in Australia between usership and ownership. I'm a user, but I'm not an owner. And the owners are the most important people within the revival, not the users.
Hi, good evening, Ghil'ad. Hello.
Yes.
Are you listening? Yeah. Okay. I'm just, I was really happy to hear the term which you have created, revivalistics. Okay. So in this term, my concern is, do you find out the role of equal linguistics in your, such revival of any particular language, the role of or relevance of equal linguistics?
Absolutely.
Or how do you find it?
Can you elaborate? I mean, the answer is of course, but can you elaborate which eco-linguistic parts. Yeah.
Exactly. Like eco-linguistics, as we know that we promote the role of language in the life-sustaining interactions of human, other species, and physical environment in eco-linguistics. So I think it's a very good way, because when you are trying to find out a way of revival, so do you think how much this eco-linguistics relevant to this such revival of the languages, endangered languages especially?
So for you, eco-linguistic, how do you define eco-linguistics? Because there are many eco-linguistics that I know.
think exactly. Yeah, because I'm working in the field of eco-criticism, and I find eco-linguistics as an important term while explaining the existence of a particular community, their language, as you have described the relationship between the three L: land, language, and the people. Okay, so I also found the same thing, because I do work in the field. Like when I go with in any community especially, so I find out how much like dedicated they are towards their language, their linguistic approach, and that comes through their day-to-day practices, day-to-day like customs. And that's why I found that if we promote this, like, because eco-linguistics is a kind of theoretical term, but when we put this eco-linguistic practice in the field, so I think it would be helpful in the revival of that again those languages which are endangered. Because in India, I'm from India, and in India, the most number of endangered languages that is in India. So I think this is a good way if we promote this eco-linguistics in particular, field work, not only in theories, just not in discussions. Yeah. So how do you find out?
So when it comes to revivalistics obviously believes that language is at the core of the entire gestaltic, holistic existence of a tribe or of a minority. So it is taken for granted that revivalistics can be situated within an eco-linguistic angle, whatever that might mean. Eco-linguistics, ecological linguistics, there are hundreds of books about eco-linguistics. The point of the matter is that people who lost their language, they lost their costumes, they lost their rituals, they lost their understanding of the world, because it was codified within the language. And these people, as I said earlier, some of them at least, believe that the language belongs to the land. So you can argue that by the loss of language, they actually lost their ecology, which is in the very basic term of eco-linguistics. So eco-linguistics is a buzzword that can be used in many directions. This is why I wanted to give you the opportunity to explain exactly what you mean. But I think, from what I understand from you, revivalistics can be situated exactly within eco-linguistics, because the entire point is that the language is part of your well-being, it's part of your land, it's part of everything, it's part of the entire package. And I personally believe that if you do not speak your heritage language, you actually are not as Aboriginal as you could have been. So you are less Aboriginal vis-a-vis yourself as a non-speaker. So in other words, or as a speaker of the language. So in other words, language is what allows you to fulfill this gestaltic, holistic, eco-linguistic reality. I personally believe that revivalistics, for somebody interested in helping people, especially those who unfortunately suffered linguicide, revivalistics should be the buzz term, not eco-linguistics.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are you from Rishikesh?
Yeah, no, my name is Rishikesh. Yeah.
But you're not
My
from
name is
Rishikesh? Okay.
No, I'm not from, I'm from Delhi, New Delhi. Yeah.
Thank you, Rishikesh. We have another question from Maria Nisar. She's saying, how can a dead language be revived, and are we still same now as colonized, or we are getting the sense of our national identity?
No, say it again. Say it again. Can you repeat it?
How can a dead language be revived, and are we still same now as colonized, or we are getting the sense of our national identity?
Okay, so how can a dead language be revived? Very easy. You need to have a dictionary and a grammar. That's it. I can make any language. I can reclaim any language as long as I have a dictionary and a grammar. Now, you might ask how many words? In Barngarla, we have 3,500 words. It's plenty. In the Old Testament, you had only 8,000 words, out of which 2,000 were hapax legomena, which means appearing only once. So you had 6,000 words practically in the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is considered by many Jews and Christians to be the epitome of literature, etc. 6,000 words. I have 3,500. You know, it's very easy to make up 2,500 words if the Aboriginal community is interested to neologize. So when you have more than 100 words, more than 1,000 words, no problem whatsoever. With regard to grammar, so I have grammar. I have reconstructed the grammar of Barngarla according to other languages that are related, and some of them are still alive. Of course, they're about to die, unfortunately. I also have the grammar written in 1844 by Clamor Wilhelm Schumann. Of course, I know he wrote it as a German, so he could not avoid his German Weltanschauung, his German mindset, his German worldview. He knew Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. I know all these languages. I know German, of course, and therefore I'm trying to enter his head in 1844. It's not easy. Yeah, I'm now 2021. But if you know all the languages he knew, you actually can enter, because don't forget one thing. When we write grammars of languages, we usually write them according to the categories that we already know from the languages we know. Say we know Latin, we know, we studied German, so we study about ablative, genitive. You know, we actually analyze languages according to the Apollonian tendency, according to our own language, which, by the way, of course, is very flawed. But this is what typologists do. I mean, this is typological linguistics. Or descriptive linguistics, or basic linguistic theory. I mean, this is exactly that. I mean, it's kind of very narrow-minded, but this is at least it's good as a reference point, you know. But coming back to the question, how do you revive? You learn the language yourself, and then you prepare material to teach the language at the best pedagogical way. Not every linguist is a good language teacher. So you can actually ask the best language teacher to do it for you if you're not good at language teaching, and you teach the custodians. If the custodians are not interested, then of course you don't revive it. Their language reclamation is only with the custodians. It's not a laboratorial, scholarly ivory tower endeavor. It's dirtying your hands in the field. It's dealing with people who are the poorest, most disadvantaged, most disturbed, most scarred, most traumatized people on earth. I'm generalizing. I have seen suicide attempts. I have seen violence. I've seen aggression. I've seen a lot of things when I deal with people, because colonized people, and this comes to your second question, are people with a trauma. It's a post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, sometimes 5 generations later, because, you know, PTSD can go intergenerational. It's transgenerational. So if you're, I mean, I don't need to tell you, I mean, like, if your father is a Holocaust survivor, of course, you might eat very, very fast, even though you were not in the Holocaust. But it kind of goes either within the genes or just because of the nurture, the exposure to your father, etc. So this is this. However, there is more and more sense, not of national identity, because in Australia, Aboriginal people, as a generalization, do not want to have nationhood. They do not want to have their own country. It's different from, say, the Palestinians who would like to have their own country. In Australia, Aboriginal people, by the way, there are Aboriginal people who want to have their own country. It does exist, but mostly they want to have sovereignty or self-autonomy, or sovereign, but it does not mean to have a nationhood like with army, with police, with no. I mean, they still have the same police officers as the Australian government, etc. So it's not a national identity in the sense of Pakistan or like India. No, we're not talking about that. There is more and more sense of pride. Aboriginal people who thought that their language was simple and primitive because of the Western kind of trickling down that I was talking about before, suddenly realize, well, actually, our language is extremely difficult. It's extremely complex. In Barngarla, you have a pronoun for we two, dual. If we are related through my mother, I use a different pronoun we two than if we are related to each other through my father. So I mean, this is the distinction that I'm talking about. We have dozens of pronouns. I mean, English is very easy compared with Aboriginal languages when it comes to kinship. Of course, when it comes to mathematics, Aboriginal languages are not the best. In Barngarla, Guma, Gudara, Gaba. 1, 2, 3. That's it. When you are a hunter-gatherer, why should you count more than Guma, Gudara, Gaba? Because you just kill the kangaroo, you eat it. You don't kill 10,000 kangaroos and put all the tails in the abattoir, and you need to, you don't have agriculture. As opposed to what Bruce Pascoe wrongly argued, Aboriginal people did not have agriculture. They were hunter-gatherers. So why should they have more than Guma, Gudara, Gaba? It's enough. So this is related to Rishikesh's question about ecolinguistics, where when your ecology is a hunter-gatherer's one, your language should be a reflection of that. Of course, if you change your ecology, then you can add numbers. Nowadays, I can count until 1,000 in Barngarla. It's just a matter of us deciding. We change the ecology, we change the language as well. But language reflects the ecology.
Thank you very much. We have a question from another Maria, but this is Maria Leonara. Will translanguaging help revive a dying language? Would you also consider translanguaging as language management strategy?
Can you ask her to define translanguaging? Because I've written an article about it, but there are many definitions for translanguaging. Maria Leonora Guerrero. She can talk. Where's Maria?
Hello, sir.
Yes, tell us about translanguaging.
Actually, by translanguaging, I mean the use of the overall linguistic repertoire of an individual, particularly a multilingual speaker or even a bilingual speaker. I got this definition from Garcia and Way.
So can you explain again? When you ask, will translanguaging help revive a dying language, what do you mean? So when I use more than just the language that I'm trying to revive?
Actually, it's more of using the mother tongue apart from the second language or the third language. Actually, it's like using multiple languages in communication with other community members.
But you understand that when you revive a language, or when you want to revitalize a dying language, your goal is to use that language as much as possible. Now, what happens if it is not your mother tongue in translanguaging? What happens?
Actually, my belief is that when you use translanguaging, you have more leeway to use your mother tongue, especially um, when what is being promoted is monolingualism than multilingualism. Because I believe that mother tongue loses its identity or begins to die if what is being practiced is monolingualism rather than multilingualism or even bilingualism.
Right. So when it comes to monolingualism and multilingualism, I personally believe that every person in the world should be a native speaker of 4 languages. Now you ask which 4 languages. The first language is the international language. Currently it's American, it might change. The second language is a national language. So if you live in Pakistan, it'll be Urdu. If you live in Bangladesh, it'll be, or in Dhaka, yeah, in Bangladesh, it'll be Bangladeshi, etc., etc. The third language you should speak is your heritage language. You might be a minority within Pakistan or minority within Italy, and you should speak your heritage language. The fourth language you should speak natively. I'm talking natively, so I think that it's related to your question. Is the language that has to do with your profession. So if you are an opera singer in Pakistan, I believe you should be a native speaker of Italian. If you're a chef, or at least strive to be, aspire to be a native speaker. If you're a French cuisine chef, you should speak French, etc. So every person should speak 4 languages. When it comes to language revival, I said earlier that it doesn't matter whether you want it or you don't want it. When you revive a language, especially a language that does not exist, or especially a language that does not have native speakers, or you're not the native speaker, ipso facto, it's against monolingualism, because you end up at least with bilinguals, if not with trilinguals or quadrilinguals.
Thank you. Ghulam Rasool has raised his hand. Sorry, Sajad Rasool. If you have any question, please ask.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Sajad.
Thank you, Turab, and thank you so much, Mr. Zuckerman, for such a wonderful talk. Actually, I have a question. I am from Pakistan, and I am a Sindhi speaker. And if I talk about the history of Sindhi, and that Sindhi is a language that has adopted or borrowed borrowed words from many languages, just like Arabic, Persian, Hindi, Urdu, English. So now what we can say that is borrowing or hybridization of a language can we mean that it is endangering a language?
No, I think that Sindhi is not endangered with this regard, just as Japanese is not endangered with this regard, even though Japanese, when you listen to Japanese, every sentence has an Americanism in it. In fact, I heard Koizumi Junichiro, who was the Prime Minister of Japan with the long hair. He spoke in Japanese. I was in Japan at the time. And it's funny because whenever I went to an internet cafe, because there were no mobile phones, they asked me, "What's your name?" I always said, "My name is Junichiro, Koizumi Junichiro." So then they call you Koizumi Junichiro. Everybody's looking and they see a foreigner. So I used to kind of laugh about it. He said in Japanese, "We should fight the Americanisms that penetrate our masakomi." He used the word masakomi, which happens to be mass communication. Without even realizing, he used a Sindhi is alive and kicking. It has at least 30 million speakers. I don't. What is the percentage of children speaking Sindhi within the Sindhi community? Do you know the percentage?
Actually, I don't know the percentage, but majority of people in Sindh speak and write in Sindhi. It is a language that is being taught in Sindh. As it is also considered as an official language that is mostly being used in for administration and education, and there
Right.
is a huge literature being found in it. But
Yeah, I know,
why
but the point is that the borrowings into Sindhi do not jeopardize Sindhi. Borrowings are perfectly legit.
Hmm.
What jeopardizes Sindhi, or it's a hypothetical, would be that suddenly the Pakistani government unfortunately says, well, you now forget about Sindhi, you need to only speak Urdu, as a little bit like they did on the 21st of June of February 1952 in Dhaka, at the University of Dhaka. As you know, this is the mother language day. That we don't want. We don't want any government to come and to tell you you're not allowed to speak Arabic, you're not allowed to speak Sindhi. Now, I had a friend, I have a friend, I hope he's alive. He was a friend of mine like 25 years ago when I was in Oxford and then in Cambridge as well. He told me that he gave a lecture in Qatar, and he said to them, when the Quran has words from Aramaic, from Greek, from Hebrew, and he told me that several kind of ultra religious Muslims stood up and said, this is untrue. The Quran was written in perfect Arabic. It was written by Allah. So my friend, who is a very perspicacious, clever man, he didn't know how to get out of this quagmire. You know, it's not nice to be surrounded by people, by Al-Qaeda who are... And then he said, are you telling me that Allah did not know Aramaic, did not know Hebrew, did not know Greek? I mean, he put them to silence. The same here. The point is that the Quran can be written in most beautiful Arabic, although it is full of foreign influence. There is no problem whatsoever. Look at English. English, which is the most successful language today, to date. What is the percentage of German words in English? I mean, it's much lower than the percentage of Romance words in English, which is French and Latin. So, in other words, it's very funny. There was, you know how the French are fanatic about not having Anglicisms within French. So they don't want to have we can, they don't have to have, so they invent all these stupid neologisms. Now, listen. There was a guy, I don't know his name. He actually, when the Académie Française fought the Anglicisms, the Americanisms, there was a guy in England who managed to write a letter to the Académie Française, I think, in English, only using Frenchisms within English, only using French words within English. Instead of begin, he said commence. Instead of... keen, he said perspicacious. So he only used French words and Latin words. I mean, it just shows you. So I don't think that you should care even a little bit about the borrowings, about sometimes even code switches with it. No, it's not. It's nothing. It's nothing to be frightened about. Nothing to worry about. What you should worry about is the plethora, is the hundreds, if not thousands, of languages that are disappearing, not because of borrowings, but because the percentage of the kids within the community speaking the language natively is lower than 100%. What is language endangerment? As Turab said kindly, I'm endangered languages professor. So endangered that I'm the only such professor in Australia. So endangered does not only modify the languages, it modifies the professor as well. I'm the only professor, unfortunately. So when I retire, that's it. There is no endangered. There was endangered professor. Now the professor is the professor. You know, they say professors never retire. Professors never die. They just lose their faculties. So the same here. So what is endangerment? Endangerment is determined not by the number of speakers. So you tell me, I don't know, 32 million speakers of Sindhi sounds a lot. But if you tell me only 20% of kids, Sindhi kids, speak Sindhi, I'll tell you this is severely endangered. If you tell me 99%, that's wonderful. The only thing that matters is what is the percentage of kids speaking the language. It does not matter whether the language has some borrowings. Unless, of course, you tell me that the entire grammar suddenly is a totally different language. I'm talking about borrowings which are lexical or calques. I'm not talking about suddenly you have like a total metamorphosis of the language and suddenly you end up speaking Urdu.
What was my concern is that if I have a word that is already in Sindhi, but instead of using the Sindhi word, I'm using a word of English or Urdu. So is it, does it make it endangered or not?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. We have question from Anam Abrar, two consecutive questions. First, who can take the responsibility for reviving a language, or only linguists responsible for that? And what activities or strategies could be used to promote the revival of a language?
Firstly, I very much recommend you to read this book because the second half answers this very question. The only people in charge are the custodians, the language owners. They are the mother. The revivalist, if he does not come from them themselves, is only the stepfather. The stepfather cannot tell the mother how to educate her kids. The mother is responsible. The stepfather is a facilitator. He's a slave, if you want. He's a punch bag. He's a donor. He's a schlepper. He's a driver. He's a psychologist. He's a social worker. He's a linguist, but he is not at the wheel. It is frustrating. I know, because I've been there and I am there. But this is reality. And revivalistics, as opposed to descriptive linguistics, puts the custodian at the center of the enterprise. The descriptive linguist, the typologist, the documenter, the documentary linguist puts the language at the center. The revivalist puts the language custodian, the language owner at the center. There is a huge difference between documentary linguistics and revivalists. Most documentary linguists cannot be revivalists. Of course, some of them can be. It's a little bit like the correlation between a good researcher and a good lecturer. Of course, some good researchers can be good lecturers, but who said that a good researcher is a good lecturer? Absolutely not. I know many good researchers who are horrible at lecturing. Horrible. And I know many good documentary linguists who are incapable of reviving because they suffer, for example, from Asperger's. If you suffer from Asperger's, you can be the best typologist in the world. But revivalistics? Absolutely not.
Thank you. And we have the last question from Mary Jane. Her question is that how can simple people, maybe she is referring to the common community, help us to revive a language or in reviving a language?
Well, firstly, you're not a simple person. By choosing to be with us, with Turab, and with your humble servant, it makes you automatically, in my view, an advanced person, not a simple person. But if you mean a monolingual, somebody who does not know linguistics, If you mean somebody who is not Aboriginal, if you mean some, I mean, it's not exactly clear what you mean by simple. The point of the matter, if you have a heart of gold, and your question is kind of so modest that I kind of tend to believe that you might have a heart of gold. If you have a heart of gold, if you have balls of steel, which means you are a very resilient person. You can be a woman, a man, non-specific, doesn't matter. Balls in the metaphorical sense, as I said earlier. If you have the patience of a saint, if you are willing to be a punch bag, and if you have the 7 characteristics that I'm going to give you now for what a good foreign language learner is, then you can definitely be a great revivalist. And the 7 characteristics are, but of course you don't need to have all the 7. You can have, you know, are musicality, mathematicity, excellent memory, high IQ, high EQ, shamelessness. You're not afraid of losing face. And motivation. These are the 7 characteristics required by anyone who would like to study a foreign language, plus the 4 characteristics required by revivalistics. Then you can be a revivalist. Now, if you tell me, look, I'm musical, but I'm not mathematical. I have a great memory, but I'm not that good at shamelessness. You know, I suffer from shame. Well, you can improve. The point of the matter is that youth in Asia, or in fact in China, are usually not good at foreign language learning because of shamefulness. Because, you know, if you're afraid of making a mistake, you're afraid of losing face, of looking stupid, you are less likely to acquire a foreign language, because in order to acquire a foreign language, you need to make mistakes. This is part of the design of the prompt. So this is what I'm saying. So these 7 characteristics of what is a new foreign language learner, because when you revive a language, it's a language that obviously is not your language, so you need to learn a foreign language. So you need these 7 characteristics. Then you need these 4 characteristics. So for example, in my case, as a generalization, I have the 7 characteristics. I have, as I told you, 2 characteristics, and then the last 2 of the revivalistics I need to improve: the patience of a saint, and also the punch bag. You know, the willingness to be a punch bag. I'm saying it because usually, so like recently, somebody used me as a punch bag because, you know, it's very easy. You're the foreigner, you're the outsider, you know. So, and then I saw that I actually got a little bit kind of upset. You know, like instead of saying, okay, you know, I'm a punch bag, it's part of the package. It's not a big deal. Okay, so what's a big deal? You're a punch bag, so what? But I noticed that I was not like that.
Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end. Thank you all participants, and special thanks to Professor Zuckerman, who made it possible. And indeed, the session was very fruitful and very engaging. I hope all of you, this session benefits all of you in a meaningful way. I'm thankful to all, and please do fill the form for e-certificates as well. Thank you so much, Professor, again, and thank you all participants, and stay tuned for our coming webinar. Bye-bye, everyone.
Sir, how will we get the slides and the recording?
Yes,